Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Future Dreamers. I'm Kathryn Loeffler, and I'm so excited to have a guest here today. Natalie Rose Martin is the founder of Arbor Vitae Mystery School. She's going to tell you all about herself in her own words, but she is a practitioner of sacred sovereignty. She is a midwife of New Earth. And she is entrained into the Gaian Codex, and she has a lot of interesting things to share with us today. So I'm so excited and so grateful to have her here. And without further ado, Natalie, can you tell us in your own words who you are, how you serve? We have a bunch of questions to get into, but I just want to hear a little intro of yourself from your own words.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathryn, for having me here. Identity is interesting for me. I'm a woman. I stand on the land. I am connected to the earth. I am a woman of this earth. In the sovereignty movement, there is a lot of talk about various ways to orient oneself to the land or the system. And I like to keep it super simple. So I'm a woman of the soil, of the living earth. And I do energy work and medicine work and have been doing that work variously since really the early 2000s, but 2010 is when I started practicing energy work. And all of that experience and training that I've had is culminating in Arbor Vitae Mystery School.
I love it. And I'm so excited to get deeper into this. And as I was taking a look at your work, it's very obvious from your aura that sacred sovereignty is something that you've worked on for decades and mastered. Can you explain a little bit to us about what sacred sovereignty is as a concept? And then, I'm sure that your path has been a very interesting one for you to cultivate that within your own self. So can you tell us a little bit about your path and then how you help people follow that path for themselves?
Yes, thanks. The path to sacred sovereignty started for me doing energy healing. So the way I orient to this is that there's a vertical axis we all have. The core channel is called Sushumna in the yogic tradition. And it really goes all the way up to our higher self and then through our higher self to source and all the way down to the core of the earth if you follow it all the way. So that vertical axis is what I orient to as a sovereign woman in my sovereignty, that it's like I have standing because I am like a unique spark of the one, and I can orient to this vertical axis as like the anchor for that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And that's it from my astrology perspective. Yeah, we've got one of those too. So, it's so beautiful to see how, really at the end of the day, there's one truth and many traditions find their way to it. So, loving where you're going with this.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so that axis is the place where we can find our unique essence, like the blueprint of our true nature. And then we interact on the horizontal plane, on the earth plane with, what we're bringing through this vertical axis.
Amazing. And what was your path like to catalyze you to, realize that sacred sovereignty is something that we all have a right to claim, in kind of regular society, we don't kind of get the manual of how to do that. So whenever a healer has found their path, I think it's always fascinating to know how they came to that path. Was it just innate in you from, a young age, or did you have a catalyzing event that led you there? I always love to know those kind of stories.
Yeah, I think all of the above. Like I've always had knowings. Like I remember when I was 14 having a very clear thought that the revolution was going to happen in my lifetime. And like what the revolution, I just was like, oh, the revolution's happening while I'm here. That's why I came. And I didn't, I kind of was like, what is that going to look like? Who knows what that's going to look like? And then, yeah, orienting to the power and capacity that's available when we tap into the vertical axis, that came online through Energy Healing School, which I started in 2010. And then I did have other teachers along the way that really wove in different pieces for me. And I did a lot of investigating of radical self-responsibility starting in about 2016. Phrase radical self-responsibility points to the kind of the source of power for truly being in sovereignty. So when I say that, I'm talking about like the ability to see our subconscious patterns or have them reflected, or trust that life will reflect those subconscious patterns to us so that we can see them, and to be able to work at the level of the subconscious or in the energetic field to make shifts in our own systems that will shift our, our perception or the way that we're showing up, to sort of shift reality to be more in line with what we want and what is in alignment with, divine will or the Gaian Codex or whatever one is connecting in with.
Yeah, I think I love that. I mean, it's just, again, funny and beautiful to see the parallels, because in the work I do as an astrologer, it maybe is from a bit of a different tradition or putting different words on it, but it's exactly that. And when you mentioned the horizontal plane, when you can stand in your own, I kind of think of in astrology, it's like you have the midheaven at the top of your chart that goes down to the IC or the Imam Koli at the bottom of your chart, which is the bottom of your chart is where really from your own unique understanding of your consciousness, once you've grasped that you do have a unique spark, and it is your opportunity to bring that, to cultivate and steward that unique spark into the world, you have to sink your like roots down into the ground to really stabilize yourself so that you have the spinal structure, just from an energetic standpoint, to enact your power, which is not power through force. We're talking about personal power that would allow you to cultivate your seed to a point that it can hold, the weight of the flowers that you're meant to donate to the earth. And so, again, just hearing you kind of describe from your tradition how that works, it's just awesome to see the parallels. And then the horizontal line is kind of called the line of consciousness in astrology, and everything below the surface is the subconscious, but your understanding of who you are. And then with that, you play above the surface in the realm of above the horizon, where you're interacting with everything that moves, relationships with people, birds, animals, everything that we can tangibly touch in the material world. And as all of that evolves us, we have our own ways of evolving it. So it is just really fascinating to hear what you're saying be so ring so true in the astrological tradition as well.
I love that. I've been feeling more and more called to study astrology lately, actually. It feels like the next layer for me.
There's so many layers to all. Yeah, exactly. It's as we are able to just live in this world where you live in Asheville, North Carolina, I live in the middle of Texas. We've never met in person, but just as we are able to connect through the group that we are in for our own businesses, I've just had such an amazing time, and I've felt like it's just Christmas every time I get on these calls and meet people who have gone deep into their own study and their own forays of understanding the mystery of the world, and then kind of share that with each other and be like, we all have so much to give to each other. So feel very grateful and fortunate.
Yeah. Thank you. Cool. So the sovereignty, I really hold that there's inner sovereignty and outer sovereignty. And I worked the inner sovereignty for a long time. And that included, this capacity to start recognizing subconscious material and reflected in life, and do shadow work and, deep healing on healing the inner child is part of it. If your 4-year-old is triggered and you're not aware that your 4-year-old is triggered, you're not in sovereignty. You're acting out a triggered 4-year-old, right? So we have to integrate all of these aspects of self. And coming into spiritual adulthood is another thing that I'll point to as we're stepping into this sacred sovereignty. So I really feel like doing the foundational inner sovereignty work opened me up to be available to the outer sovereignty work, which I also offer through the mystery school. And that looks like that really, I feel like there are layers of awakening through these crises that are being presented, and COVID pandemic was one of them. And now, this flooding of Asheville is another, and we can get into that. But so what massive waves of awakening are being initiated by these crises. And it was in the wake of COVID and the sort of tyrannical, from my perspective, measures that were being put in place, I was like alerted to all of this outer sovereignty material. So I really only dove into the outer sovereignty scene in 2022. 2021, 2022 is when that started coming online. And that looks like recognizing the difference between public jurisdiction and private jurisdiction, which is a whole story I won't get into too much here. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about all of that stuff. And if anybody's interested, they can check it out there.
Yeah, we'll put everything in the links.
Beautiful. But so the public jurisdiction is basically where people are operating generally. We have like the birth certificate, the all caps name, the social security number, driver's licenses, paying taxes to the IRS, registering your car, like all of that is the public jurisdiction. And, it's reasonable to operate in the public jurisdiction and certainly convenient at times. And just to know the difference between when you're essentially like in someone else's jurisdiction and when you're in your own jurisdiction, or how to maintain your own jurisdiction within the wider scene. Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So there's lots of paperwork and lawful language that accompanies all of this. And one of the offerings through the school is a private express trust course. So like my business, the school itself operates through a trust. And that provides the capacity for me as a trustee to operate in commerce through the vehicle of the trust with the school, while the woman, Natalie Rose Martin, maintains my sovereignty in the private.
I love that. Yes, that does make sense. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you today was a little bit, the concept of New Earth is not everyone knows about New Earth, but in the spiritual realm, it's definitely a term that is thrown about and people have different various awarenesses of it. So from your perspective, and definitely with the kind of flavor of sacred sovereignty, what does sacred sovereignty have to do with being a midwife of New Earth? And if you can tell us about your experience of coming into a role of responsibility of being someone who's stewarding the birth of New Earth, would love to hear about your perspective there.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Ooh, it's like a lot I can feel in my body. It's a lot just to enter into that territory. So how does sacred sovereignty inform midwifing the New Earth? That's the question?
Yeah, if you want to tell us about the concept of New Earth, maybe just to jump into this topic and we can unpack it layer by layer.
Sounds great. Thanks. So from my perspective and my study, Earth is verging on like a massive shift, like a evolutionary quantum leap. And this has probably happened a few times. So the reason that everything is so intense and time is speeding up and crises are kind of piling up on each other is because the Earth itself is in an evolutionary process that's like leading towards this event horizon or this quantum leap in consciousness. It's a massive shift in consciousness. And lots of teachings, new and ancient, have been pointing to this for a long time. And yes, there's also the story that like every generation says, like the end is near or whatever, like that, that has been in the field for a long time. And, those of us who are tracking all the layers or many of the layers, it's clear that it's ramping up. And my perspective is that the new Earth is birthing the new version of itself. And those of us who are tracking that are midwifing it. And to be a midwife, you need to be like in a clear self-managed state, right? We need to be able to manage our own energy, track our shadows, not project, be able to like perceive clearly what's happening and not project our own birth trauma or woundings or whatever on the birth that's unfolding. and to really be able to be in witness. And I'm not saying that like I'm doing 100% perfect job of all of that, but it is definitely my practice to like track shadow, track projections, and really be in witness and hold that sacred neutral perspective of like, okay, this is unfolding now, and you know, how can I hold the vision of where we're ultimately going, which is a better place, through this, you know, challenge, which birth is a challenge. It's like an initiation challenge, right? Yeah. So the new earth is it's Gaia's plan. Like the planet itself is on a trajectory, and we all are fortunate enough to be here at this time to have the experiences that are available in this level of intensity. It's a lot of soul growth available.
In no doubt, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful time to be here, but to do your own spiritual growing up process, I think is really what those who want to take advantage of that are called to do, so that you can maintain a level of middle road awareness, integration, so that you can withstand being a helper of the birthing of new earth, because there are so many opportunities to be distracted by what's going on in the world, and understanding how to balance your own empathy with how to manage your own life, so that you can have the capacity and be fit to serve your communities around you as well as your own family. And so yeah, it is just quite a wild time to be on earth. And speaking of earth, you have a concept, or the concept of the Gaian Codex. I've heard whispers of this, but I do not know the deep concept. So I would love it if you would explain a bit about that to us, because I think it'll really inform the other things we talk about. Because given that you're in Asheville, North Carolina, and Hurricane Helene devastated the region almost a month ago, I think there's so much to talk about climate, the earth itself initiating us as a collectivity into our spiritual growing up, so that we can actually be part of the new earth. So please tell us a little bit about what the Gaian Codex is, maybe how you've been trained to it yourself, and how you lead others through that process.
Okay. So the Gaian Codex is an emerging mystery. It's not like I have all the answers about the Gaian Codex.
Got it. Yeah.
She does. But
Okay.
we like receive and discover them. It's an exploration and a discovery. COVID, first of all, I'll just say I grew up in the woods. So like I've always felt grateful for that. Like, I'm so glad I grew up in the woods and, was connected to nature in childhood. And then I moved to Asheville, which is like a small city, but it's in the mountains, it's just surrounded by tree covered mountains. But I lived in town for many, many years. During, like, as soon as the lockdowns happened in 2020, I got a lot of downloads that spring. And I got really clear instructions to go outside and lie on the ground every day for 20 minutes at least. And so that was my practice then. And it lasted quite a while. And then variously, like, my habits have changed some. I moved a couple of times since then. And for the last 3 years, I've been living like 5 minutes down the road from a mountain where I go walk every day. So I get my nature time that way. So I still lie on the ground sometimes, but like I lived in an apartment at the time. It was like imperative, like lie on the ground. And that's one of the first like practices or assignments I'll give people, depending on what's going on for them. And I get, reports back that it's like absolutely life-changing to just lie on the ground for 20 minutes every day. And even if it's cold, like you can do it with blankets and find a sunny spot that's like protected from the wind. And you don't really have to do anything else. You could, if you have a meditation practice or, Qigong or whatever, you could combine those things. But like, the practice really is just get your body on the earth. And it could be bare feet on the ground, but lying down is really lovely as well. Like having a literal connection with the body of the earth is super important. And that sort of led to me having a practice with a tree, which the relationship with that tree is what birthed the mystery school, Arbor Vitae Mystery School. Arbor Vitae is Latin for tree of life. So it was having a relationship with a tree that like invited me into founding a mystery school, first of all, and the exploration of all of the layers of what the tree of life is, which is like related to the Gaian Codex, right? So the Gaian Codex, from what I have discovered so far, is like the way she would have life be.
Okay.
It's living in alignment with nature. It's living in alignment with her plan, which is unfolding now. It's emergent. And in the mystery school membership, we do a practice together that I've been calling collective emergence, where we'll like choose a theme or a subject and then together explore it in energy space with consciousness. And ultimately, my understanding of where we're going is consciousness awakens collectively through the body of the earth. So we're moving into a space where like the internet is like the clunky training wheels for where this is going, right? We actually will start sharing consciousness. We'll still be individuated. Like it'll still be Natalie's essence and Kathryn's essence and the wisdom and knowledge that we each hold, but we'll start like being able to inform each other through the field, through the body of the earth, and then the collective body mind of the new humanity reveals itself through it. The importance is through the body of the earth. It's like, it's not all up here. It's not all, that so much of our culture is like neck up, and it's really anchored deeply in the body and the body of the planet. And because there's so much neck up and so little like deep embodiment, trauma healing, I know all of these things are getting more popular. I'm so grateful. But the deep embodiment, trauma healing, and shadow work that has to happen to clear the body so we can fully occupy it and then anchor deeply is quite a process. It's like quite a thing to undertake. And it feels to me like the most important thing people can be doing, because the body of the earth is processing what we are not processing, which is why the weather events are getting so intense. So we are a global collective, and that is becoming more and more apparent all the time. And the more we have, the more we choose to sort of chew on the material that we've been given to digest and metabolize and integrate in this lifetime, the less of a burden there is on the body of the earth. But because so much has been suppressed, she's like, okay, well, now I have to like have a massive flood because these waters need to be cleansed. So here's how we're doing that.
Yeah, so many things come to mind as you say that. I think that if one goes back to imagining, an Edenic state of Earth in the past, when bands of hunter-gatherers, had very little global negative impact on the body of the earth, and we may have seen it as like, oh, well, that was an ideal state of being in right relationship to the earth. But then if you really think about nature always being on time, nature always having its own plan, and so this concept that you're illuminating for us in the Gaian Codex, that earth knows where it's going, it's leading us to a new birth. And so I think as we learn to use the training wheels of the internet, and as social media has taken over the world, there can often be so much, and maybe this is our own patterning, or maybe I'm just talking for myself, but maybe there's some collective truth to this, that like, oh, are we doing it wrong? Is social media just, full of trash? Obviously beautiful things are being built with social media, but if you kind of think about, in astrology also, I think it brings this concept to light in a beautiful way, that you have your individual consciousness and in order, but you also have collective consciousness, and eventually we may have a chance at reaching cosmic consciousness, but you have to kind of understand one level of it and integrate it before you can move to the next, and then to the next. And there's various levels of shadow work and understanding your patterns in order to kind of climb that spiral staircase. And so I wonder if you can share anything about how do we bridge, the idea that humanity used to be a species that naturally lived in right relationship with the earth, and wasn't degrading, the planet in a meta crisis level of ways. But now that we do have this level of technology, is there something right that we are moving towards, and it's just a very rocky road to get there? I guess my question, is everything on time, and is it just a very rocky birth process in order to initiate ourselves, which in order to initiate the collective, we all have to go probably through our own initiations, and watching it play out together is just this wild experience, but we are all in some magical collective process together. And the earth is going to, through connecting to nature, through listening to nature and learning that process, each as an individual, that we can actually build something collective together that is meant to be, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think so. Let me just riff and see if I answer your question.
Yeah, sure.
So yes, I think connecting with nature, going body to body with the earth, like really developing that connection, what that does is it supports your mission and purpose to be in alignment with her plan. And then what I find is like I get moved. And then my body goes, to a new spot. Like I'm here, I've been here for 3 years. I'm tending this mountain. It happens to have a spring on it. The water turned off in Asheville. Some men came with some tanks and some tubes. They hooked up the spring and brought it down to the road. Like part of the reason that happened is because I've been there tending the relationship with the land and with the water.
Beautiful.
So that's like an example of how the Gaian Codex plays out, right? Like it kind of puts us where we need to be or where we can be of use for the collective, if that makes sense. And then just to talk about the birth for a moment, like I just was having a conversation with a client who's pregnant and about to have a baby here soon about, like, is there stuff that you haven't like dealt with yet on an energetic, emotional level? Because those pieces they will slow down a birth process. And someone who has like really cleaned up their scene, their side of the street, they've done a lot of work. They've cleared, they've done a lot of embodiment. They've integrated a bunch of shadow. They've cleared their lineage stuff. Like those births and it's not cut and dry. It's not always like that. It doesn't mean that if you have a challenging birth, you haven't done enough work or whatever, but there's correlation, right? And so that just points back to, this is the earth is having a challenging birthing experience for sure.
Yeah.
It's long, we've been at it for a while. My sense is we've been at it for a while. Contractions have been happening and the water just broke. That this flood in Asheville was the waters breaking. I mean, the reports are coming out now. This is like the biggest disaster our country has ever seen, essentially. It's definitely worse than Katrina. And so, so the sense that I got like that first week by the way, when disaster happens, like everything gets so magical. Like gratitude goes through the roof. Yeah. And everyone was helping each other. I mean, and still are. Like there's just like this huge upwelling of love and care and gratitude. It's really super potent. And that first week, it came clear, like the waters are breaking. Okay, so the birth process isn't over. Like there are more contractions. There's no turning back. We gotta get the baby out. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we'll just be seeing them for the rest of our lives, and that maybe COVID was the first global wake up to initiate the whole world into, witnessing each other go through transformation in ways that have probably never been possible in written history, at least, like maybe in other time epochs people experience that. But, as we start to witness, we had 2 major hurricanes within, 2 weeks of each other in the United States. And so devastating climate, challenges like Hurricane Helene, like, do you see them as, and it sounds like you do, the question that I had written down was, are these collective initiations that not only bring us into our own awareness of how are you going to have the resources mentally, physically, in your own environment to deal with challenges. And as this just continues to happen, because I think unless we are faced with challenge, like we aren't going to lead ourselves naturally into discomfort, but through the process of discomfort, totally new awareness can be born. And so are we just witnessing like the rocking and rolling of a birth process that's going to deliver many more catastrophes to the human collective, but through it, as you mentioned, seeing the gratitude, seeing the magic that comes from neighbors just like picking up and not needing to be told, just like helping each other and actually experiencing what if we were just living in regular like Amazon packages coming on time world, you're not going to go out and like feel the magic of helping your neighbor. And so maybe that is the like magic sauce through which we can actually start to taste collective consciousness and get on that tip together as humans. So tell us more about what the Gaian Codex is telling you about that, and like, are we going to live the rest of our lifetimes just like figuring this out together in different ways?
A great question. I don't know. I don't know about the timeline. I feel like, the timelines are impacted by decisions that people make every day. So the more people choose love and choose to not project, and like that feels like a really juicy place actually, where everyone can just like tap in, because the concept of service to others, or like helping people, I feel like translates most often to like external action. But actually, there's this huge internal piece of work to do around that, which is like when someone is doing wrong in your eyes, like that person is doing it wrong. There's something that's reciprocal about that in you. And the invitation is to like turn around and look in the self, like where is that arising? It's either a match, like, oh, I hate that behavior because I also do it, or it's like touching some place that's wounded in you that's related to that behavior or whatever. So doing that work is it amplifies personal power and like the baseline love frequency on the planet. So yes to all of these like remote rural neighborhoods where people didn't really interact much before. Like every one of them became a team, and politics went out the window, and sharing was what people are doing, especially, I mean, things are starting to like calm and open, and people's identities are coming back online, and they're like, wait a minute, you think such and such, and I'm a so so like it's starting to happen. But that portal of potential where like all of that stuff goes out the window, and there's no space for blaming or projecting anything. It's just like survival mode, will do that. It like clarifies what's most important. So I feel like that's a really key piece, an important place for people to play in aligning with the Gaian Codex, because she's choosing love. Gaia chooses love, and love sometimes looks fierce. It sometimes looks like a flood. And it's so interesting too that it's the year of the dragon in Chinese medicine. It's the year of the dragon, and dragon energy has been very strong in my world. That initiation started for me in 2016, but a year and a half ago, in the spring of 2023, it came online super strong. And my story about dragon, like capital D dragon, is that it is like an embodiment of the Gaian Codex. It's a way for us to interact with this energy that's arising in the earth. Kuan Yin, is this water goddess who like rides her dragon like on the wave. And that's just like such a beautiful metaphor for what's happening here, which is like intense power, destruction, and passion, like all mixed in together. Like she's fierce. This body is the collective body is sick, essentially. So cancer and heart disease are on the rise, and there's so much unprocessed material in the collective that the body is like having a healing crisis. One of the modalities that I love is homeopathy, and in the practice of homeopathy, you take a remedy that has a similar vibration to the dis-ease or discomfort that's happening in the body, and it like helps the body, it activates the vital life force and helps the body push out the thing that's causing the dis-ease. And it feels like that's what's happening with the body of the earth. She's like, okay, like there's too much toxicity here, like we have to cleanse.
Right.
That's going to look like an eruption over here and a flood over here and a fever, a fire over here. So how do we best navigate this? I mean, just anchoring to, keeping ourselves clear, keeping ourselves grounded and connected to the body, keeping ourselves clear of projection, blame, and shame, and really cultivating the capacity to hold that sacred neutral witness space. And then the mind is very useful, but to not be locked in at the level of the mind, but to really be able to occupy the body and the heart, and then to be able to be moved by intuition, right? And that feels like that is connecting into the Gaian Codex.
Yeah, no, I super appreciate that. I mean, that was one of my motivations for getting deeper into astrology, thinking of astrology from the perspective of, is this the magical time clock that allows us to see greater patterns in the cosmos, and then through that unravel our own patterns, that come in the form of projections or, deep patterning that we have from our families or our societies, that as we get initiated to unraveling them, we can have deep compassion for how they arrived in us and our process for unraveling them. But as we go through that process, everything is a gym for our intuition, to that as it becomes a deeper channel and a deeper connection to Earth and the cosmos, that we can hear Earth better, and then through that increased ability to hear, do her work, more on time, more on purpose, and with greater clarity. And leading to the topic of magic, which I wanted to ask you about, and it's beautiful that you already mentioned that one of the things you saw as this great catastrophe struck your region was that almost like if a bell tolls really loud and you like after that ringing kind of starts to dissipate, you're like, I'm almost hearing a different frequency on the earth, and seeing that show up, whether it's through synchronicity, like a neighbor bringing something that another neighbor needed and they didn't talk about it, or I don't know the details of how it's playing out in your community, but seeing that show up, when the week before maybe people were arguing about who's got what yard sign in their yard sign and being like, I'm going to judge them or this, that, or the other. So as catastrophe maybe catalyzes the quickness of things that are happening on the earth, how do you feel like magic also is maybe meeting as like a reflective wave that's going to like become part of most people's experiences? Or how is magic quickening for you, and how do you see that being part of Earth kind of taking us to the next level of where we're going?
Yeah, magic, synchronicity for sure. And then, so I mentioned like consciousness waking up through the body of the earth, and I mentioned the dragon energy. And so one thing that I know is chaos breeds opportunity. Chaos opens up timeline potentials, right? Mm-hmm. So that first week, which was like, it was full like gratitude, sharing, loving, caring vibes, and full chaos. And some fellow energy workers and I came together to just to seed like what is happening here. Like there's a timeline convergence. Where is this going? We are going in the direction of love. We are going to the new earth. And So again, with the collective consciousness, the collective awareness, like doing that work in a group is really powerful. And one of the things that came online that first week was like my one friend who sort of initiated the whole thing had checked the field around Asheville and it was shattered. Like the field around the whole region was shattered. And he installed, and then we refined and sort of shored up and nourished a net of love. He ended up calling it a net of love. And I see it as like kind of like a honeycomb structure. It's gold and it's blank. It like started just over Asheville and then it spread out. And it's essentially like an energetic structure that allows love in, and anything that comes at it from the outside is reflected back in the same strength that it came as love. So whatever is coming is like getting reflected back as love. So more things unfolded that felt just incredibly magical, like in our shared witnessing of like, okay, what, you know, if we're installing this net of love and we're choosing like the timeline trajectory that we're on through this chaos, beautiful things unfolded. And then multiple more meetings of groups happened over the next couple of weeks. And some of them I participated in and some of them I didn't. But I heard multiple reports from different people that were not talking to each other or doing energy work together, reporting on this dragon egg that like is in the center of the earth and has been for a while. I've been tracking it for a while. It's cracking open. So like multiple people reported on that from different crews, you know? So like my perspective.
Like you guys had not texted each other in the group chat, like, have y'all seen in meditation the dragon egg? And so you're just hearing of it, you know, wow, that's strange and beautiful and very magical sounding.
And magical, right? And from what I've learned about dragon over the past few years is like, first of all, reptilian energy is about preservation. And reptilian, you know, there's like the reptilians get a bad rap. Like there's like a story about negative reptilians on the planet who are controlling things.
Yeah, you can go into any rabbit,
that's true. The way I understand the way the universe works is about 10% of beings have a tendency towards like negative polarization or control and force. And about 90% of beings are like, you know, pretty like sunshiny.
Yeah.
And I feel like reptilians are the same, you know, like 10% of reptilians might be baddies and then the other 90% are either neutral or like moving in the direction of positive.
Right. And we need the polarity, because if there wasn't 10% kind of like stirring shit up, like how would you know? Yeah.
It's the engine, right? The shadow.
Yeah.
Like metabolize that in order to move forward. But reptilian energy is about preservation. Dragon is like the octave of reptilian energy. So there's, you know, there's serpent, there's lizard, like there's alligator down here, then there's serpent that rises. Dragon is the octave. And dragon is about protecting the sacred.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
And
that's very beautiful.
Is sacred. And the dragon, you know, I feel like it's a gift of Gaia to give us this like mythical image and felt sense experience of this like super powerful and fierce and ferocious protector. It's protection energy. So that's what's coming online. And, you know, there's so much destruction. It's really intense how much destruction has happened around here. My neighborhood is not destroyed, but like, I have seen some things, you know, I've definitely like made my rounds and went to check on my people, and there's been a lot of destruction. And I think that the kind of unchecked, endless growth, both like economically and in the tech sector, and like the continuous extraction of resources from the body of the mother, like all of that, she's like, all right, you guys, like,
Yeah,
not gonna,
you can only do so much.
the
Yeah.
destruction is like the reconciliation of that overgrowth, right? It's like cancer like doesn't know when to stop growing, so then it gets really big and then it collapses its whole system. So that that's kind of my interpretation of what's happening, is like the that endless growth is not sustainable, and the counter forces are starting to act on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense.
And of course
Go
we get
ahead.
to grieve that, you
Yeah.
know, grief. Of course there's grief, and there's like actual death. And that's like, there's a lot of grief around that, to be processed. And
Yeah.
bless the people here who have lost their lives and their families and their friends. And I feel very fortunate and relatively, unscathed in the whole
Yeah.
catastrophe. But
Yeah.
there's been a lot of destruction.
Yeah, and maybe this is this new era that we're in where we're not just reading about it in a newspaper. People who are not affected by this, our entire right brains can tap into, the felt sense of destruction and grief that's happening by seeing it happen, not from just, individual reporters, but seeing from personal friends or friends of friends that and they're sharing their stories. And that's a new way of metabolizing the change that is happening on Earth, and that will just continue to happen. And I guess as someone who did grow up in the tech sector and kind of spent at least 20 years in that world, and definitely felt from a soul perspective like, oh, I don't want to say that all of this is wrong. I appreciate, everything that science brings to us. Like I take penicillin when I have, a bacterial infection, but the unchecked growth and like this idea that the expansion curve has to be continually pointing upward, and in astrology, there are many points in astrology where, the sign Leo, once the sign of Leo has understood through the signs that precede it, who it is, and it's like, damn, I'm ready to create in the world. And it goes out, and I kind of like describe J-Lo as like the ultimate Leo, and she's very badass and she's very beautiful, but one of the reactions to like displaying yourself in your full individuality to the whole world is people are going to have shit to say about it, and you might not like every the reflection that you get by, putting yourself out there. And then the sign of Virgo is kind of the antecedent to that, where it realizes like, okay, inward reflection must be part of after an outward force, there must be an inward force to bring balance to that. And so, it does seem like that the earth needs to, balance the masculine and the feminine, and not demonizing, the fact that we've been in a very patriarchal mode for thousands of years, but that there are going to have to be things that force us to bring things back into balance and realize that we can live materially stable lives without like depending on capitalism just going up and up and up forever. And so catastrophe often is the mirror we need to say we can live lives of decent, human stability without like this desire for constant growth. And now that we have technology to see everybody's reaction to tragedies and catastrophes, I feel like the rest of the nation and world that watched this, our empathetic engines were activated as we watched communities come together to deal with the deep destruction that's just soul ravaging, but you're also getting to grieve in community. And that's such a frankly magical process to get to watch, and we've felt it from the sidelines. So I think that, and as we are able to connect through technology, we can share our practices of how are we figuring out our own magic in our own parts of the world. And you mentioned that you're a steward of a mountain, like you have an awareness of a stream that like maybe nobody else even like knew that stream was there. Maybe you guided the people so that they could use that water, and the earth was generous enough to give that water. And so yeah, there is so much outward destruction, but in those ripples I feel like we're finding ways to like how can we make things right, and ask the earth to guide us, because the 90% of us that want to be in the light and like grow it and steward it, need guidance, but we also need the ears to hear it and like take action on it. So it was devastating to watch your community go through this process, but we're also learning as we grieve alongside you, from, our technology that allows us to see what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the collective experience is definitely coming online. And you named it earlier. It started with COVID. Like, it was a global experience, right? Everyone was like having some perspective on the same unfolding. And what you were just sharing about, like, how do we do this? Like, how do we come back into balance as, as this healing crisis allows things to be rearranged? And the word that comes forward for me over and over again is regenerative. Like, we need to move into regenerative systems, not systems that grow continuously. Like, they have to start looping back into themselves, right? We have to restore the soil.
Right.
Like, that's the base of life, right? And the soil has been, because we've been extracting from it and enacting these farming practices that are not in harmony with nature. So coming back into harmony with nature, living closer to the earth. And certainly there's so much knowledge and wisdom on the planet about how to do these things already, like permaculture and beyond. And slowing down and really listening to the land and the water and like what wants to happen here, and getting permission, actually, like being in actual relationship with the land and not just assuming like, oh, I can just build my house here because I want to.
Sure.
But like being in a conversation like, hey, I'd like to live here. Yeah, how do you feel
Am
about
I
that?
invited? Yeah.
There's this place for the house, and what feels important to honor and restore here in order to be in balance living here, that type of thing. Like coming into a more like indigenous of the earth. Indigenous means of the earth. Living is how we get to come back into balance.
Yeah. And so many people have lost their indigeneity, like I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of years ago it was that my family had those connections, but the like deep desire to return to that level of it's such a skill, that has been lost for so many generations. And so this may be the first time that many people have the opportunity to kind of claw their way back to that lost knowledge, as we are forced there through the grieving of seeing what's going on in the earth, and knowing that most people have a genuine desire to be a positive. If they were asked, if someone was like, do you want to be a positive, like have a positive impact on your world or not, you'd most likely say yes, but it requires learning how to do that. And there are so many subtle skills that we can learn to reclaim through our intuition, through listening to the earth, through developing our own personal magic. So it's going to be a fascinating rest of our lifetimes to watch people, and I feel like greater numbers move towards this path. And as we kind of get close to the end of this, we definitely want to leave time for you to explain a little bit more about your offerings in Arbor Vitae. But is there anything else you'd kind of like to leave us with before we talk about your offerings and where people can find you?
Lay on the ground.
Beautiful advice.
And find a local spring if you can, and drink spring water that's like literally filtered by the body of the earth and has information in it about what it means to like live in harmony. Yeah. Make friends with a tree. It's totally worth it. Yep. Great. Yeah. So I do have a YouTube channel. It's Natalie Rose Martin, or Arbor Vitae Mystery School. And the website is also arborvitaemysteryschool.com, or my name, natalierosemartin.com. And currently through the school, I'm offering the trust course. It's called Establishing Trust, and it's a self-paced digital course where I walk you step by step through the process of creating a trust web, actually, an impenetrable trust web. And one of those trusts can be a public trust that has a bank account and deals with the public. And there are other entities that can weave in as well. Like you could work with an existing LLC or any other company structure that you want. So that is one. And then kind of accompanying that trust course, there's like a PMA option and a church option. If those structures feel supportive to your business and offerings, you could weave those in. And then there's the monthly membership where we drop in, we do a monthly call. There's like a library of resources. And then we do a monthly live call where we do this collective emergence process. And actually, the call is this evening, and we're going to explore the dragon egg. So we kind of, we take a subject that's emergent. Last month, it was, what does it mean to be Christed? What is Christedness? So we explored that. It was very potent, very beautiful. This month, we're going to check out this crackling dragon egg and see what is forthcoming from that. And then I'm just like tracking, what's emerging in the collective field and what feels right. And then I bring that to the group, and then we do collective emergence practice with it, which is participatory, right? Like all of the members are pretty energetically adept, and we're exploring these topics together and seeing what wants to kind of come forth. So we're like evoking, what else does the Gaian Codex have for us, So that's available. And then I'm currently building a one-on-one package for people who know that they hold big medicine, but haven't like quite developed it or brought it forward. So I'm going to be holding people through that process of like really finding that that essence and giving it structure and understanding how it wants to move out into and through the world. So I'll be supporting people with that. There might be a couple more things on there, but those are the main now. And you can feel free to check out the. Thank you so much, Kathryn. I really appreciate it.